Okay, it's the last week of 30 Days to Greatness, and today it's Business 101 4, our fourth look at Business 101, and we're tracking greatness. The things we track, the things we pay attention to, the things we focus on are the things that get better. So, what should we be tracking if we want to achieve greatness? I'm glad you asked. Let's take a look. Business 101 4, Tracking Greatness. 30 Days to Greatness. I'm Paul Curtis. In his book, Great by Choice, Jim Collins asks and answers the question, why do some outperform 10 times their competition, even during unpredictable and even volatile times? Collins began his career as a Stanford Graduate School of Business and is probably best known for having written the book Good to Great, which sold millions and millions of copies. I honestly don't know. I don't know. It's still on the bestseller lists. It's still the best of business books on everyone's list. By the way, it's a great book. You should read it. In this work, though, he focuses on how companies remain or become great during chaos. Of course, we saw incredible chaos during what I call the Second Great Depression. Some people call it the Great Recession. In real estate, it was a Great Depression. But that's the relevant question for you, because there's only three kinds of people in the world: those going through a storm, those who just came out of a storm, and those who are about to enter a storm of life. And if you've lived any number of days, you know this to be true. It's true for your business. So today's look at Business 101 is a look at tracking the right behaviors and outcomes, since what you do is the only thing that moves the needle. Collins' research team found that the first and most important principle of success for any business was and is what he calls a fanatical discipline. There's a famous quote attributed to various sports coaches over the years. I guess all of them have said it at some point or another, so it depends on which coach you heard it from, John Wooden, Bobby Knight, or any number of others. But the quote is, it's not the will to win that matters most. Everyone has that. It is the will to prepare that makes the difference. In sports, everybody wants to win when the lights are on and the cameras are rolling and they tee up the ball for football or toss it up for basketball or drop the puck for hockey or whatever sport it is. Everyone wants to win when the game starts, but it's the teams and the players who have put in the work to prepare for those moments that more often than not come out on top. So everyone wants to win when the game starts, but who has figured out what to work on before the game starts that will put them in a position to win? Because it's not just working on any old things. It depends on what will work in that game. Who's figured out what behaviors not only put them in a position to win, but will actually cause them to win? Who has a fanatical focus on those behaviors, or a fanatical discipline to work on those behaviors? Let me tell you the story of Amundsen and Scott, who were competing to become the first to plant a flag at the South Pole in 1911. Take a look at this video that tells that story. Here you go. Let me roll this. Greatness isn't a mistake, it's a choice. Let me tell you about two men, Amundsen and Scott. They were roughly the same age and had similar credentials as explorers when they both set out in 1911 to become the first human ever to plant a flag at the South Pole. But in preparation, they had radically different approaches. Amundsen spent years preparing. Physically, became an incredible cross-country skier, went to live with Eskimos, adopted their style of clothing, the looser fit that allowed the sweat to evaporate off the body and yet was protective from the elements. He once rode his bicycle 2,000 miles from his home in Norway to Spain. He was fanatical with his supplies and his planning. He understood that, you could get just a little bit off course. Oh, by the way, with the Eskimos, he also learned to become an expert dog sledder. And he understood you could get a little bit off course. So he took way more supplies than he needed, some 3 tons of supplies for just 5 people. But he stored them along the route on the way back so that they were marked with black flags against the snow, and the flags were miles wide in case he got off course. And he was diligent about marking his course as he went. He took the storage crates and broke them as he went and marked his course every quarter mile with pieces of the crates, and then marked every 8 miles with a flag, so that if he got a little bit off course, he could still find his supplies and survive. In fact, he also took 4 versions of the same tool to get the altitude and temperature readings in case something happened, so that he knew where he was and what kind of conditions he was in, so he knew how to behave. Scott, on the other hand, decided not to take dog sleds because he didn't have any experience with them, because he didn't get himself experience. He decided to take some motorized sleds that had never been proven in this sort of extreme temperature, and ponies, because he was used to using ponies as he explored. Well, ponies sweat on top of their hides, and their feet, their hooves, pile drive down into the snow. They're not really well suited for snow. And it was just a few days in that the motorized sleds gave out, and it wasn't long after that that the ponies died. And so they had to man-haul. They had to physically pull the sleds themselves. And he only took 1 ton of supplies for his 17-member team. And he only marked it with 1 flag, I guess believing he would be perfectly on track to find it. Well, he was ill prepared. And he reached the South Pole, but 34 days after Amundsen reached the South Pole. And when Amundsen was 34 days towards home, Scott made the turn to start heading home. That was in December of 1911, which in the South Pole is the summertime, but it's not summertime like we're used to summertime. There are still extreme temperatures. And he was far, far away, having to man-haul the supplies himself with his team. And the weather turned. And Amundsen made it home, a hero, having been, his whole team, having been the first ever to plant a flag at the South Pole. No one from Scott's team survived. Well, that's kind of an extreme example. But it does press this point that I'm trying to make, is that it's not the will to win that's significant. Everyone has that. It's the will to prepare and to track the behaviors along the way that will lead to winning. So the next question becomes, well, what are those behaviors? What are those things that we should be tracking? Well, fortunately, we're not blazing a trail here and becoming the first ever to have a real estate career. We already know these answers. So press on, you'll see. All right, go get them.
Yeah, so it's not blazing a trail, as I said. We already know the behaviors that will make you successful. And so let's take a look at this. Preparing to win means working on your riffs, your rock and roll riffs, your scripts, because the most important thing is what comes out of your mouth. Walking through homes so that you understand the markets you're in, whether that's when you're showing them to people or when you're just previewing for yourself. And diligently planning your day so that you spend them doing the things that cause you to win, namely prospecting for leads among the top of that. Those actions are not a mystery. We already know what they are. It is working your data bank and establishing real relationships by
having 10 great calls a day with past clients, current leads, and referral partners, your VIPs. It's letting one or two of those 10 calls a day be to someone that's in a position to help you strategically meet more people. One of those VIPs that can help you to get positioned for more. Just last week, I met an elder law attorney, a friend of mine, and I asked him if he could help me think about how to market myself to other elder law attorneys. He happily told me about a group of senior care professionals that meet regularly for networking and suggested I attend. And he said he would get me that information. Well, you better believe I'm going to call him again this week and ask him for that information. But understand, he happily told me this. I keep trying to say, people love to help. And I even called a competitor of mine last week and had coffee. Now, I happen to know this guy really well, and I wanted to ask him some particular questions about business. And he's a very thoughtful businessman. So he gladly said, look, I'm here as your friend. Here are my thoughts on your questions. Now, truthfully, I didn't really agree with all the thoughts, but the point is, even my competitor, because of our real relationship, was willing to help. Make sure your calls are leading to face-to-face appointments. Meet 10 people a week face-to-face. Certainly people you're showing houses to or going on listing appointments with, or other agents you're networking with to recruit, because that pays you significantly as well. But sometimes they're just to break bread. Let 5 of those be for a meal or coffee. People in your sphere of influence, those VIPs. The elder law attorney I met, we split a bottle of wine at Luigi's. He happens to be an Italian guy, loves Italian wine, loves this Italian restaurant, and so I was happy to split a bottle of wine with him and talk business and life, and we had broader conversations than just business. Another attorney friend of mine I met the week before last, and we had coffee and donuts. And that was another wonderful conversation about business and life. But practice what you'll say when you talk about taking your business to the next level and asking them for help. Run that riff, rehearse that riff. No band hits the stage having not rehearsed, right? And you need to rehearse your riffs as well. Attend 1 or 2 seminars or networking events every week. Treat them like a party and be prepared to speak with enthusiasm when you talk about your passion for helping people with some of the most important decisions in their lives. I used to hate going to networking events until I recognized that it's really a social gathering. It's a party. Hey, what's up with you? Let me tell you about what's up with me. But again, be prepared to hit those riffs. Be prepared to speak with enthusiasm and passion about what it is you do. Passion is attractive. Enthusiasm makes people notice you. So be prepared for those moments when you attend events once or twice a week. Be prepared to tell a quick story to that end of helping, your passion for helping people. And be prepared to talk about the market in specific ways. You know, one of the things is true in a market here, we have this seller's market these days right now as I'm doing this webinar, where often there's more than one offer for good homes. Just this last week, we got in a multi-offer situation with a client of mine, and fortunately, we were able to come out on top and get that house under contract. But it's also true that there's really more multiple offers on a lower price point in this market. On the higher price points, $500,000, $600,000 homes, there's not often a multiple offer situation. So you can get away with a little bit lower offer in those price points. Well, that's a specific thing about our market that we could talk about, you know, when we're in a social situation. Let people know that you know stuff and they need to know you.
Walk through 3 to 5 houses every day at various price points, either as you're showing them to a client or as you preview them yourself so that you have a growing grasp on the markets you work in. Post in social media channels about your experience as a realtor so you're known as a realtor. So post as a realtor so you're known as a realtor. And comment and like on 10 other people's posts so that they see yours. One, so they see your name in their feed, but then also the way these social media algorithms work. If you're commenting and posting on their stuff, then they'll see your stuff. Make sure you spend 20 hours a week prospecting for leads every week. This is the behavior that will cause greatness in your business. That reminds me of what Collins called a 20-mile march. Remember, he was tracking companies that outperformed their competition by at least 10 times during the same turbulent time period. Some outperformed their competition by more than 20 times. And remember, their fanatical discipline was success factor number one. Well, take a second and check out this next video I put together about that concept that Collins calls a 20-mile march. It's important. So this is the book I mentioned that Jim Collins, Great by Choice. In it, he talks about the story. By the way, this is a public library copy. It's entirely possible for you to get an excellent education and develop your ability to do business, to think about how to help people, and to have move from just survive to thrive and be able to make an impact in the world by visiting your local library. Anyway, in this book, Collins tells the story of how these companies that he was comparing, and by the way, he was comparing like companies, like Progressive Insurance, which outperformed its competition 10 times and more during the period of great turbulence. And he was comparing them to Safeco. And maybe Safeco Insurance, and it's possible you don't even know Safeco Insurance because they no longer are around. But in this book, he talks about that fanatical discipline to do what he calls 20-mile marches all the time. And it comes from the idea of setting out from San Diego, California, to put one foot in the Pacific Ocean and then march on foot all the way across the country to the Atlantic coast as far north as Maine and put your foot in the Atlantic Ocean. And the key to being able to accomplish such a huge feat, the argument goes, is by being disciplined to do it in 20-mile segments every day. And doing what it takes to be prepared to be able to do 20-mile segments no matter the terrain, no matter the weather. And you can imagine as kind of a tortoise and hare story when you talk about one person who sets out on a beautiful Southern California day and walks the first 20 miles. And even though this person feels like, wow, I could do 30, it's such a beautiful day, they have the discipline to stop. And the next day to do another 20 miles. And at some point they find themselves, of course, as you're marching east from San Diego, in the mountains. And that weather may change. It may become quite cold. But if you've prepared for this journey, you would have the equipment necessary to be successful. Maybe the clothing, the attire, the type of footwear, a hat for my bald head, and so on and so forth, so that it's possible, even in the worst of weather, to be able to accomplish 20 miles. Now compare that to someone who sets out and decides, wow, this feels great. I could do 30 or even 40 miles this first day. And then the next day they're quite tired and sore. And about that time when they hit the mountains and the bad weather, they decide, wow, this is really severe. I'm not necessarily as prepared for this type of weather as I should be. And by the way, those 40 miles yesterday really took it out of me. I think I better hole up and rest and let this weather break. Well, that's that tortoise and hare comparison. And you can imagine someone waiting till spring to get through the Rocky Mountains. And about the time they hit Kansas City finally, the tortoise, if you will, will have their foot in the Atlantic Ocean. Well, Collins goes on to talk about what sort of 20-mile march discipline do these successful companies exhibit. And this is your business I'm talking about. Ready? This is from Collins. I'm going to read it right from Collins' book. They have clear performance markers. They know exactly what it is when they've been successful, what it is they're tracking. Their self-imposed constraints. They say, look, I've done what I set out to do today. I'm just going to shut it down and be ready to do it again tomorrow. They are appropriate to the specific enterprise. The things they're tracking actually lead to success in that particular business. They're largely within the company's control to achieve. That is, your business. Is it up to me to be able to accomplish this, or does it depend? That is your daily tracking, your weekly tracking, your monthly track, your yearly tracking. Are the things I'm tracking within my power to achieve, or do I need some other force? We're not worried about the other forces. We're worried about you and your behaviors. A proper time frame, long enough to manage, yet short enough to have teeth, is what he said here. The idea that I don't want to be tracking, a year's work, because a year later I could have been way off track. I want to be tracking, a short enough time period. Imposed by the company upon itself, doesn't require anybody else to bring this about. You have the power to do it. And these are things that are achieved with high consistency. Those 7 points, I'll put them in the slideshow so you have them, are the key to your 20-mile march. We just talked about what you should be tracking, and they're all within your power. And they're all very doable. Now, some days you might not feel like it. Some days you might be a little tired. Do it anyway. None of this is beyond your reach. Tag, you're it.
So you got it? The idea is your 20-mile march is within your power to achieve. Let me take one more look at some slides I put together for you. It's a principle. The 20-mile march is a principle that allows you to choose greatness. Greatness is a choice, not an accident. Tracking the behaviors we talked about every day, every week, every month, and every year for 10 straight years will virtually guarantee your success. That's because whatever we measure gets better. So if we're measuring the right things, that's because whatever we focus on gets worked on. That's because we know these behaviors, when worked on, lead to success. Your 20-mile march needs to have these 7 characteristics. They're the things I just read from the book. Clear performance markers. Self-imposed constraints, so you know when to stop. Appropriate to the specific enterprise. Doing 20 push-ups a day doesn't exactly cause you to have a great real estate business. But talking to 10 people about your real estate business every day, now that's on track. They need to be largely within your control to achieve. You need to have a proper time frame that you're tracking them in. If you wait a whole year, you'll have missed the boat, very likely. They need to be imposed by you upon yourself, and they need to be achieved with high consistency. Now, mind you, that's not perfection, but it is high consistency. It doesn't help to only achieve these with low consistency. That's not how you get to greatness. I've attached what I call a greatness tracker to this webinar, either in the email as an attachment or within the webinar for you to download. Hit those numbers weekly and achieve greatness for years to come. Not just in years to come, but 4 years to come. All right. It won't take you years to get there. You can survive, thrive, and have the impact you wish to, whether that's to have the freedom to travel, to have the freedom to spend time with your children when and where you want to have the freedom to impact your community in significant ways. Whatever the impact that you wish to have, you can do it if you are about that 20-mile march. Tag, you're it.